Hey everyone, what's up? It's Liam. Today I'm going to look at the game number 43 in the TCEC Super 17 Superfinal between Stockfish and LCZero. Now in this game, Stockfish is the one who's finally playing with the white pieces that I'm going to look at, and Leela has the black pieces. And we get a Scandinavian here, so the opening book goes as follows: e4 d5 takes, queen takes, knight to c3, the queen retreats, and then it was d4, knight to f6, knight to f3, followed by a6 and g3. And this was the end of the book move. And after the end of the book, Leela plays the first move, which is bishop to g4, pinning the knights on f3. Stockfish attacks the bishop, which retreats back to h5. And now Stockfish fianchettos their bishop on g2. e6 is played, and now g4. So this is quite similar to a Caro-Kann actually. So g4 hits the bishop on h5, forcing it to retreat back to g6. And now Stockfish follows in with the move knight e5, unleashing this bishop on g2, hitting this b7 square, and now black's got some defending to do. First move I looked at here was queen to b6, defending the pawn, but I think white can follow in with castles, and after bishop d6, play this nice move, knight to c4. And the queen's now pretty much forced to retreat back to a7. A horrible square to put your queen on, I think we'll all agree. And white should just follow in with g5, forcing the knight back, and just develop with bishop to e3 and d5 ideas with a discovered bishop here. And white's doing incredibly well in this variation. I also looked at knight b to d7 in this position. So sacking the pawn on b7, but then black can play rook b8, but after bishop c6 it doesn't really work, black just loses a pawn. I thought maybe black may be able to take on e5 at some point, but this bishop can just retreat back to c6, pinning the knight on d7, and again white's got a great game. So in the game then, after knight to e5 and this discovered attack, Leela decided to play knight c6 instead, and straight away though white's got a brilliant game. So Stockfish just doubles black's pawns with bishop takes c6, b takes c6, and now plays h4. Threatening to play h5 and maybe potentially f3, trying to trap this bishop on g6. Again, this h4 move is really good because it forces black now to play h5, and at some point now white can just take on g6 and double another set of black's pawns. And that's just what happens. So bishop f4 is played, threatening to take on g6 and defend the bishop on f4 with a discovered attack. So queen b4 is played, knight takes g6, f takes g6, and now queen to d3. Attacking the g6 pawn, the bishop on f4 is already attacking c7. However, black is attacking some pawns, so they're attacking b2 and also attacking g4. But look at black's absolutely horrific pawn structure. Two double t pawns, two double g pawns, and an isolated pawn on e6. This is absolutely horrible, and white's doing very well. Now a typical try in this position is obviously queen takes b2, but white can follow up with rook to b1, attacking the queen, forcing it to retreat backwards. And white can just follow in with g5, attacking the knight. If it jumps into d5, takes, and just follow in with queen takes g6, king to d7, and white has a supreme advantage with rook to b3. Threatening queen f7 ideas, so the queen can retreat back to e7, but then after rook b7, rook c8 and rook h3, white's threatening to go either rook c3 here or maybe even rook a3 at some positions. But basically white's just going to win this c7 pawn, because it's pinned against a rook on the 7th rank. Again, I think we'd all take white in this position. So go back to the game then. The queen didn't take on b2 because it's suicide. It's just too ambitious. So king f7 is played to defend the g6 pawn, and Stockfish just calmly castles queenside. And Leela, to be fair to her, is attacking now. Rook b8, threatening to take on b2. And Stockfish defends by playing the move b3. And it's sort of a trade of pawns now. H takes g4 is played, bishop takes c7, attacking the rook, which goes to b7, and the bishop just retreats back to g3. So sort of a trade of pawns there. However, now black's actually just got a triple g pawn, so this is ridiculous. And already this sort of seems to indicate that white's got a supreme advantage. Play continued on though. Leela tried her best. She played rook h5, a good way to get the rook into the attack. Stockfish just put their rook into the centre though, attacking this weak e6 pawn. Leela played rook a5, and Stockfish just calmly defends with king to b1, defending their a2 pawn. Now looking at this position for white, it looks like the knight on c3 is Stockfish's key defender here. So I looked at knight to d5 by Leela. see if she could have played this and removed this defender. So after knight takes d5, pawn takes, white can actually counter-attack though with h5, attacking g6. And if pawn takes h5, there's queen f5 with check, the king can hide, but then comes in moves like rook e8, and if queen a3 to attack a2, white can sack the exchange, rook takes f8, queen takes and just take on h5, and win the g4 pawn on the next move. And the point is now that white's basically saying my bishop is holier than your rook, or much better than your rooks, and it's probably hard to disagree because they can just plonk it on this e5 square, defending d4 and hitting at this g pawn if we could put the rook in onto g1 for white in a few moves time. So okay, knight d5 was interesting. Instead though, Leela played queen to a3. I think again still fine. It sort of transposes actually, so queen e2 is played and now e5 is played. So queen e2 threatens to take pawn on e6. There's no way to defend, so they play e5 by Leela. D takes e5 by Stockfish. Knight goes into d5. Remember, moving this key defender for white, the knight on c3. So actually Stockfish again sacks the exchange, is incredibly clever. Needs to leave this knight on c3, so plays rook takes d5. Leela recaptures. But Stockfish just plays e6. Check, and the king retreats backwards. And for the trouble of the exchange sacrifice, Stockfish takes another pawn, queen takes g4. Stockfish has given up the exchange but has won a pawn. Now here I was looking at bishop to b4 because again black's probably best chances are to remove this knight on c3. However, white's got it all covered. They can play e7 in this position, and if rook takes e7, rook takes e7, bishop takes c3, queen c8 can be played with check, king h7 and just queen takes c3. So the tactics work in white's favour in that variation. But going back again, bishop takes e7 could be played after rook takes, but then white can play bishop to c7 attacking the rook, and if it goes to c5, play queen e6 check, king f8 to defend the bishop, but then just comes bishop to d6, threatening to take on e7, so takes is played, queen takes, king g8, and white's got the very nice move at the end of this variation with knight to a4, pinning the rook on c5 against the queen, and white's just won loads of material. So bishop b4 is a very human move, so that's why I had to look at it, but it looks as though the tactics don't work in black's favour. So play continued on then with queen c5 from Leela, again hitting the knight on c3, which makes a lot of sense. Stockfish defends the knight though. d4 is played, attacking the knight once again. I think if queen takes here, that's just suicide, because then black maybe will just play pawn takes c3, and maybe in a few moves time can play queen a3 followed by queen to b2, so we can't do that. So after d4, Stockfish plays a relatively straightforward move, rook e5, attacking the queen. It drops to b4, there's a trade of rooks, and just queen to d5, offering a trade of queens, which pretty much black has to accept. So queen takes d5, knight takes d5, and we get into a position where white's got two pawns for the rook, but also has a knight, so two pawns and a minor piece for the exchange, with this pawn on e6 really far up the board. So to stop it progressing further, bishop e7 is played, the king goes to b2 from Stockfish, king f8, and now a key move, a4, stopping the rook jumping in to b5 to kick the knight off d5. King e8 is played, f3 by Stockfish, a5 by Leela, and now bishop c7 attacking the pawn on a5. Bishop d8 is played, there's a trade, and now how does white win this game? Well, Stockfish decided to play b4, and after takes, played a5, and the point is now these two pawns are just going to be too much for the rook and the king, because this pawn's coming up the board, this pawn's coming up the board, and this knight on d5 is incredibly tricky. So Leela played rook a7, but now a6 is played. The point being, if rook takes a6, white has the sneaky e7 check, and let's say king e8, then there's a fork, knight c7 forks the king and the rook, and if king d7 instead, white can just get a queen, takes, knight c7 and a fork again, winning the endgame. So a6 is incredibly sneaky. Of course Leela saw straight through this and played king e8, and Stockfish has continued with king to b3, and after king to d8, Stockfish played e7 check, king d7, we get the same sort of similar variation, just king takes b4, And again, if rook takes a6 here, we can just play e8, get a queen, and again fork the king and the rook with this knight c7 idea. So king e8 is played, and frankly this is lost for black. Stockfish just matched their king up the board, king b5, rook to d7, king c6, rook a7, king to b6, rook a, and then just king to b7. Of course knight c7 here also wins, but king b7 is a lot quicker, g5, king takes the rook, pawn takes, and eventually Stockfish just gets a queen, gets another queen, and that's all she wrote, and Leela lost the game. So this was an incredibly cool, calm and collective approach by Stockfish. Just absolutely smashed the Scandinavian here from Leela by just destroying her pawn structure and winning the endgame. So very nice play from Stockfish. But that's it from me for today. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you haven't already, please do drop a like, comment or subscribe to the channel. It really helps out. And hopefully I'll see you soon for another video. I'll see you next time.